Well, our speaker tonight is Dianne Odegard, and she works for Austin Bat Refuge. Something just went on my computer here. And they are promoting respect for bats and their place in the natural world through education, conflict resolution, and rehabilitation and release. Dianne is an educator. She studied graphic arts in college, but always been fascinated by bats. She has shared her knowledge with a wide range of audiences throughout Texas and beyond, and in 2012 was invited as a speaker at the Southeast Asia Zoo Educators Workshop in Taipei, Taiwan. She's always been a good friend of ours, and I think she may still have some bats at her home. So I'll let Dianne tell us about that. Dianne, you're up.
All right, thank you, Wayne, very much. Let me share my screen. Oh, sorry. So, like he said, Austin Bat Refuge is a rehabilitation organization. We also do a lot of education, and we try to do some conflict resolution as much as possible. And we have had quite a few bats. When you say we may have a few bats around, yeah, we have a few bats around, Wayne. We have, well over 100 bats still here at Austin Bat Refuge, and we haven't even gotten into baby season yet. So it's going to be a busy year. It never really stops being a busy year. So let me get right into my program. I'm going to do a PowerPoint, and I'll try my best to get through it relatively quickly. And then we're going to go back out. We're going to have Lee sign in from the flight cage, and he's going to show you some of the live bats that we have living here at the refuge right now. All right. Okay, there we go. So bats have been around on the planet for millions of years, at least 52.5 million, possibly longer. And they are unique products of millions of years of natural development. These two fossils are fascinating. They are both in the range of 50 to 52.5 million years old. And what's really fabulous about these is that they're so complete, and that's very unusual for a bat fossil because bats are small, their bones are fragile, but these were almost complete. And scientists were able to use CT scans and other technology, different kinds of x-rays, to actually look inside the skulls of these bats and to ascertain different features inside the skull that would tell them whether or not these bats were echolocators. And it turned out one of the bats was an echolocator. So that bat came a little bit later. And the other one was not, because he just didn't have the ear functions in his skull that bats would need to echolocate. So this is what bats' skeletons look like. They look kind of like us, all of the same parts in obviously very different sizes, and they have a name. The order of bats is called Chiroptera, and that's a Greek word that means hand wing. And they're pretty similar to us. They have fingers, they have hands, like we do. Their fingers are super duper long, and of course that's what that's the structure of their wing membrane. One thing that's different about bat skeletons is that their knees and their feet actually point backwards. So if they were standing up like this human skeleton, their knees down to their feet would be pointing behind them. These are all the parts of a bat that, for the most part, we have too. We don't have the tail and the membrane. We don't have the wings, but we have a lot of the same the same features in our bodies. Bats are mammals like we are. Bats are the only mammals that actually have true flight. These wings are amazing. They are just such a miraculous organ. They have, you can see all the blood vessels, you can see the muscle fibers, and there are nerve fibers in there. And these wings not only allow them to take flight, but they're very important for the bat to be able to offload the heat that is built up when they fly. Flying is such an energetic activity that the heat that it causes their body, if they weren't able to get rid of it by pumping more blood into those vessels in the wings, they would not be able to survive flight. When bats are flying, sometimes their heartbeat can be as high as 1,000 beats a minute. And this is very interesting. This came out 2-3 years ago. A scientist named Sybil Amelon discovered that bats' wings are kind of the same as our fingerprints. So bats have individual collagen fibers in their wing membranes and could actually be identified by those collagen fibers in their membranes, just like people can be identified through our fingerprints. The wings are also amazing in that they are regenerative. These wings can grow back. This was a bat that we actually found at Bracken Cave one time. Landed on the ground. A hawk or an owl apparently had grabbed it and dropped it. Landed on the trail. Wing membrane torn pretty seriously. But several months later, you can see that this has actually healed up, and this bat actually flies. This is a flying bat. We've not released her yet. We hope to one day. She doesn't fly quite well enough for release, but she may with time. So echolocation, of course, is one of the features that is essential for bats to be able to navigate and be able to forage and chase their prey in the dark night skies. They emit sound pulses through their larynx and either through their mouth or their nose, depending on the species. And then the sounds come in contact with objects in front of them and bounce back, giving the bats information, all kinds of detailed information about what it is that is in front of them, whether it's something that they want to eat or something that they want to avoid. And in total darkness, they can actually pick out an object as fine as a human hair. Now, bats can see. A lot of people still think bats are blind, but bats actually have good vision, but not any better vision than we do in complete darkness. This is a pallid bat. Pallid bats have a low-level echolocation, a low-intensity echolocation, and it's called whispering. So this is a whisper bat. And the reason they do that is these bats actually fly down and pick up insects off the ground and off of trees, off of bushes. And since they echolocate at such a low intensity, they're able to sneak up on their prey until the very last second when they grab it, as in the centipede, and fly off with it. Pretty amazing. They're actually immune to the venom in scorpions and centipedes. Echolocation is something that is usually above the range of human hearing. But with a bat detector, we can listen in on bats. This is a Mexican freetail bat, and this is a large colony echolocating. And those are actually communication calls. Sounds kind of like birds. This is a silver-haired bat. Now, bats that are foraging for insects and echolocating up in the air at night are going to increase their echolocation calls exponentially as they get closer to the prey that they want to eat. And that's something we call a feeding buzz. You can see that when bats are pictured with their mouths open, often showing a lot of teeth, a lot of people publish those photos to show how frightening bats are, of course, which is not the case. But what they're actually doing all the time, that their mouths are open, if they're not eating, they're actually sending out echolocation calls. So bats are actually not at all closely related to rodents, like many people think. They certainly look like some rodents. Some bats look like some rodents, and they're certainly a small size. But bats are more closely related to whales and hoofed mammals than they are to rodents or primates, including humans. And of course, some whales echolocate. I don't believe any hoofed mammals do. So there are a lot of bats in the world. 20% of the world's mammals are bats. Only Rodentia is an order that contains more species than Chiroptera. There are over 1,400, well over 1,400 now, known species of bats worldwide. There are 47 in the United States, 32 to 34 in Texas, depending on who you're reading. Around a dozen in Central Texas that we see most years. And out of those 1,400 plus global species, only 3 of them drink blood. And they don't live in North America. They are a southern, really a tropical species, and they live in Mexico and on down south from there. So I'm going to talk a little bit as we go through about some of the bats that we take in here at the refuge. And of course, my personal favorite is the Mexican or Brazilian free-tailed bat. That's actually the same bat. The Brazilian free-tailed bat is probably more correct, but here in Texas, our bats in Central Texas go to Mexico for the winter. So we call them Mexican free-tailed bats, and they come back in the spring. And these bats fly almost 100 miles per hour in level flight, faster than any other flying animal in level flight. This is a less than 24-hour-old free-tailed pup. Precious little baby. We were able to raise that pup and release him at Congress Avenue Bridge eventually. So we were so pleased about that. It doesn't always turn out that way. We don't do as good a job as Mother does, but we do our best. Here's a good point to talk a little bit about what happened here in Texas with the big freeze. A lot of things happened, obviously. A lot of terrible things happened to humans and lots of animals, and as well happened to bats, mostly Mexican free-tailed bats. So this is a video that we had on our Instagram account that talks about the actual freeze and snow and when that was going on. We'll go through that. That's our flight cage encased in ice. And it was quite a sight to behold. It was actually quite beautiful. Really pretty. It really was just quite lovely. So this was when it was all kind of fun. You know, it was beautiful. There was snow, and that was enjoyable. We really hoped that the palm trees would survive. Many of them did not, as it turned out. All right. So the palm trees, some of the arborists say that somewhere around 90 to 95% of the palms, the non-native palms in Austin, did not survive, and that's a real concern for us, because bats, yellow bats, northern and southern yellow bats, roost here in the skirt, the brown skirt that hangs under the living fronds. Both of these pictures show yellow bats matching that color perfectly. They actually roost not on the outside like you see here, but deep inside, where they're so well protected from predators, but not at all well protected from people who cut them down, who trim those brown skirts. So that's always a problem, and we've always talked about that and tried to alert people to the fact that there are bats roosting in those skirts, and asking them to leave them if possible. But now, since the freeze, we have a little more of a problem, because a lot of these trees are going to have to come down. So we've been meeting with City of Austin, the arborists, with the city and Parks and Rec Department, to partner with them and to give them guidance about the best way to trim these, or to take them down if they absolutely need to. And we really hope that they're going to follow the instructions that we suggested. We're probably going to be on site with them sometimes to gather bats that might be in the fronds that come down, or in the whole trees that come down. So we're a little nervous about that. This is another Instagram post. I couldn't get the whole video to download, so I just have the link to it too right here, and we can just watch it on Instagram. And this is the bats, some of the bats that came in after the freeze. We took in about 4,000 bats. Many of them were unfortunately dead on arrival or died shortly afterwards. But we were able to release about 500 of them. I'm sorry, about 400 of them. And that's good. We still have a few here, not very many, about 30 that we're still working with and seeing if we can get them to regain their flight skills.
We released almost 600.
600. Yeah, we actually released almost 600. My husband just told me that the Instagram is not showing. I'm not sure if you guys can see it. If not, I'm sorry about that. But let's go on. Let me just go on from there to the next slide. This is one of the bats that we took in from 9th Street Bridge here in Austin. Beautiful. Such an amazing bat. I've never seen one like this. This is a bat that has a color condition called leucism that gives the bat this sort of sometimes random ivory colored fur. I've never seen one that had a whole torso front and back with this color. I've seen bats that have little spots and stripes, but this is a beautiful, such an unusual and beautiful bat. We still have this bat. He does fly. He started to fly, and we're hoping that he is going to eventually fly well enough for release. I don't know if you were able to read it in that Instagram. You may not have seen it, but I mentioned that we asked for people to donate items from our Amazon wish list, because we needed thousands of syringes and heating pads and many, many other things, puppy pads for the bottoms of habitats. And this is just one very small part of, see, it's covering up half of our living room. There's a couch under there somewhere. We got so many packages that really so many that we actually had to start sending some of them back, which we were able to do and get gift cards to buy things that we actually needed. So that was just amazing the way the community helped us. We could not have done it without them. So back now to some of the bats that we do take in during the year here in Austin. This is a cave myotis. A Myotis velifer is the Latin name. And it's a little known bat. People are not very aware of this particular species because they just don't see them very often. They actually roost in caves, and they will roost in bat houses with other species like the Mexican freetail bats. And this bat on the left is actually this bat on the right at, again, about 24 hours old. This was a bat that was found in a shed somewhere outside of Austin. And my husband went and picked up this little baby, and we, again, very luckily and greatly, we're very grateful for the fact that we were able to raise and release this little bat. So cave myotis, they roost with other bats, but not the numbers that the freetails roost together. Now, the evening bat is another bat that people are not really so much aware of. They're small, even smaller than the freetail bats. They're kind of a plain bat. They look a lot like a bat called a big brown bat, which we don't see very much here in Central Texas, but they're about, I'd say maybe only a third of the size of the big brown bat. These bats like to roost in hollow trees, hollow branches, crevices inside branches. This is perfect habitat for them. There's a little echolocation call going out. And these are infant evening bats. You can see how small they are when they come in. They're pitch black. They look like little tiny dragons. And they are fierce. They like to pretend that they're big and scary, and they're just tiny and adorable. So bats, obviously there's an awful lot of diversity worldwide among bats in all kinds of things, in roosting ecology and feeding ecology, and in the way they look. Bats can have all kinds of different facial structures. They can be different sizes. These little, this nose leaf here on the top left, and there's one here in the middle, a little nose leaf at the bottom on this little white bat. Those are features that help the bat to focus an echolocation call, focus the sonar that they send out. And it also helps them. Their ears have similar kinds of folds and wrinkles. Down here, you can really see that. And although this bat is not an echolocator, this bat here is. And you can see the features that help the bat to interpret the sonar, the echolocation that comes back to the bat's ears. They're very different in size. This is the smallest mammal in the world, smallest bat in the world and mammal in the world. It's called a bumblebee bat, and it's a bat that lives in Thailand. It's very endangered, and it's very tiny. This is actually a bat that we get here in Central Texas. It's called a tricolored bat. And it is, I don't think, very much bigger than that bumblebee bat. It's very, you can see how tiny it is. They roost in caves. They roost in a cave in Georgetown. They roost up on the ceiling where people come in, and it's a show cave, and you can see them on the ceiling, and they call them chicken nuggets in that cave, because that's about the size. They can be big. They can be enormous. Fruit bats, what we call flying foxes, and there are many, many species in the world, can have a 6-foot wingspan. And they come in all sizes from small to large, and they are fruit eaters and often also pollinators. They're seed dispersers as well. They actually eat the fruit, but they don't, and they swallow some of the seeds, and then the seeds come out the other end as they fly. And so they are repopulating forests with their seed dispersal. So bats also live a very long time, and they're very slow to reproduce. For their body size, they live longer than any other order of mammal, about 3.5 times maximum lifespan than other mammals of similar size. Rodents live maybe 2 or 3 years and have lots and lots of babies over the course of a year. Bats do not have a lot of babies. They actually have typically 1 pup a year. That's the majority of bats in the US. The record for a little tiny insect-eating bat in the wild is 41 years. And there are many bats that have been recorded living longer than 30 years. So here is, again, a Mexican freetail bat, or Brazilian freetail, with the 1 pup, the 1 baby. And you saw that little video of our little baby freetail. You can see here, this newborn has feet that are actually as large as the mother's. They're born feet first, the insect-eating bats are. And those feet are extremely well developed because they have to be able to hang on to their mother, or at least to the wall of the cave, or wherever they are roosting, because if they fall, they're simply not going to survive. There are some exceptions here in Texas to the 1 pup a year. This is an eastern red bat, and we get a lot of these in the summertime. We'll start it will start raining red bat pups here in June. This is a mama with 4 babies attached to her. She can have 4 babies. She actually has 4 nipples to nurse these babies. This is a yellow bat, one of the, I believe this is a northern yellow bat. That's another bat that can have more than 1, and that we get mothers and pups in the summertime. And Seminole bats, a beautiful sort of mahogany colored bat with an incredibly beautiful hairdo there. And that's a mama and pup. The Seminoles typically will have 2 or 3 pups. So bats do a lot of things for us, other than simply exist and for 52 or 53 million years. They actually have economic value, ecological and economic value to humans. The ones that we like the best here in Texas and across the United States are pest insect suppressors. They're seed dispersers, not our bats, but the fruit bats. Pollinators, we have 3 pollinator species in Texas. Ecotourism and medicine, believe it or not. And even sonar research. The Navy has actually used a model of bat echolocation for sonar research that allows them to see even clearer under the water to find things on the bottom of the ocean. It's clearer, it's better, it's cheaper than the sonar that they had developed before. So the human medicine is courtesy of vampire bats. These bats actually have in their saliva an anticoagulant. So this is a little bat that is lapping blood from the foot of a chicken. And that anticoagulant has been synthesized into human medicine for heart patients and stroke patients. Now, the insect eating is really astonishing. How many bats in the world eat insects? 70% of all bat species in the world. And how many insects they actually eat. Bats, many of them can eat over 100% of their body weight, especially nursing mother bats. And they can save American agriculture, this is across the United States, at least $3.7 billion every year. And this is actually the very low end. The high end of this, depending on many factors, there's a paper that explains this in Science, sciencemag.org, written by Boyles in 2011. It can actually go up to over $50 billion in some parts of the United States every year. So the fruit-eating bats, and this is my girl Zoe. She's an African straw-colored fruit bat. She lives here with us. She is going to be 30 years old in July. And watermelon is actually her favorite food. Fruit-eating bats eat the best part of the fruit, the sweetest part. They either spit out the seeds and disperse them over the landscape, or they go out the other end and disperse over the landscape for promoting the regrowth of forests. Some bats drink nectar, just like birds and bees. They're the nighttime pollinators, and there are 3 species in Texas. They're way down south at the Mexican border, but in that area and in Arizona and some of the other southwestern states, you can actually see video of some of these bats drinking from hummingbird feeders during the night. So people would wake up in the morning, hummingbird feeder would be empty. They know hummingbirds don't drink at night. If you go to YouTube, you can look up bats at hummingbird feeders, and you can see a lot of videos of bats drinking nectar on the night shift. Now, this is a pallid bat. And this is the bat that swoops down, that's a whisperer, an echolocating whisperer that goes down and picks up arthropods off the ground. And this bat, it turns out, also drinks nectar from cactus plants. So this bat is not only an insect eater, but this bat is a pollinator. Pretty exciting. We do have 2 pallid bats here at the refuge, and Lee is going to, I hope, be able to show them to you in a little while. There's a little video of our boys, Bo and BD. And these are the first pallids that we have ever had here at the refuge, because they're really not in this part of Texas, or their range doesn't go quite this far east. They're a West Texas bat. And these 2 bats came from West Texas when they were pups. And they eventually, long story, but they eventually came to us for flight practice. So they live in our flight cage right now, but very soon, the researchers who had them, who were given them in West Texas by the oil field workers that found them, are going to come and take them back to West Texas for release. They're really, really something. Beautiful faces and gigantic ears. They're really, really astonishing. Pollinators and insect eaters, and all around adorable bats. So there are a lot of threats to bats, and I'm not going to go into any of these very deeply, but if you're interested in particular information about white nose syndrome or wind turbines, there's a lot of information about those 2 subjects on the Fish and Wildlife website, on a site called white nose syndrome. I'm not sure if it's org or .com. There's a site called fightwns.org. You can find information on BCI's website, batcon.org, about the toll that that those two threats are taking on bats. This is a photo of bats that have white nose syndrome. It was called that because this fungus would sometimes grow on the noses of bats. It affects hibernating bats. It started in one state in 2006 in the winter, and that was upstate New York, and has since spread to about 34 states and several Canadian provinces. It's in Texas. And it is not going to be cured, but we hope that that there is going to be eventually a little more mitigation for the death that white nose syndrome is causing. Scientists are working on several different areas to try to protect bats before they eventually develop some resistance. We're afraid that we're going to lose so many bats by that time that that it's almost going to be too late. These are some of the things that scientists are studying, and they've been studying this since 2006 and 7. All kinds of things, other viruses that might infect the fungus that causes it, oral vaccines, which would certainly be awkward. I can't quite imagine how they could be delivered to a lot of bats, but beneficial bacteria, even other, some types of other fungal infections might be something that can attack the fungus that causes this disease. The urban landscape is actually sometimes a good thing for bats. Sometimes bats do very well in urban landscapes. Our Mexican freetail bats obviously have found homes under a lot of bridges in urban landscapes. However, there can be real problems. Bats, actually, their echolocation is something that benefits them terrifically. But because of a lot of tall glass buildings, like you see, their echolocation can actually be sort of sent off track by something that's called acoustic mirroring. So these buildings, especially the glass ones, will, a vertical smooth surface, especially a glass surface, will make a bat perceive it as open space. So a lot of bats are killed when they run into buildings, and people have been very puzzled by that for a long time until this was discovered by a group in Germany several years ago, that these bats are echolocating and having their echoes come back not to them but off to the side because of this acoustic mirror problem. So this is something that, you know, hopefully someday architects might be willing to take this sort of information into their toolbox and find different ways, different materials to build structures like this. Another thing, it's really the same thing. It's another form of acoustic mirroring. Sometimes bats will get trapped in buildings, like the Superdrum here is the Irwin Center at a basketball game, very crowded basketball game. And sometimes bats will swoop down in a very brightly lighted, very crowded basketball game like this. And the reason they do that is because of acoustic mirroring. Bats also see horizontal, smooth, and shiny surfaces as something other than what it is. They see it as water. They perceive it as water. So these bats have been trapped in buildings for a long time, and they're getting thirsty. They're trying to drink, which is a good thing to know, because often people feel that they are being attacked when bats swoop down in a crowded function like that. It's not what's happening. Wind turbines are killing millions of bats every year, and birds, many, many birds. It's a technology that will be here. We want it here. We obviously want as much technology that does not rely on fossil fuels as we can get. However, there are ways to build them, to run them, and things to include on them that might be able to mitigate the mortality that they cause. And again, there's a lot of science going on, a lot of science happening around acoustic deterrence that they hope to actually deter bats from flying near those turbines. Bat-human conflicts are as big a threat, if not more, than other things that are threats to bats, mostly related to fear, lack of understanding and education about bats, fear about disease, exacerbated by sometimes terrible media reports that are simply not true, and some of them that are half true, but not true enough. And of course, there's the negative myths that have been around forever. The Dracula myth, we know all about this one. It's silly, but you know, people tend to believe the things that scare them sometimes. Excuse me. And things about people turning into bats. This is a myth that has been around the world many, many times for centuries. Not even a vampire myth, but simply people turning into bats or cats. The bats in your hair has just been around forever. Why would bats want to get in your hair? That's the question. They don't. However, they sometimes do fly close to your hair or other parts of your body because they're trying to get the insects that are flying around in close proximity to human bodies. So misinformation in the media and even in papers that are published by very reputable publishers and universities, sometimes it's just not quite right. Sometimes it's terribly egregious, and sometimes it's just a mistake. And a lot of this has to do with the disease of rabies. Rabies is a horrible disease. It's incredibly important to understand how not to get it. But people who should know better still report rabies as being, or bats as being carriers of rabies. They're not carriers of rabies. And the vast majority of bats will never get it. When they do get it, they die from it. They sometimes end up on the ground when they have rabies, but they can be on the ground for many, many other reasons as well. So public health concerns can be really exaggerated if an animal rabies case occurs. If it's headline news if a bat is found to be rabid at the rabies lab, and it shouldn't be, because bats are vector species. That means that that disease is going to be in the population of bats, probably forever. That just means that some small percentage of bats will get rabies. Please don't Google very much information about rabies, and try to really only get information from reputable sources. Here's how not to get rabies. So don't pick up, don't handle a bat, don't touch a bat, not because touching a bat's fur will give you rabies, but because touching or handling a bat will scare the bat, and they may bite like any other wild animal in self-defense. Did bats cause COVID-19? No. And this is something that we're going to be dealing with for a very, very long time. The pandemic was caused by people, it's spread by people. It is still unclear in which animal that virus originated, that mutated into what humans get, COVID-19. Now, you'll hear people, scientists, researchers, saying it's likely it came from a bat. And the truth is, it's really not at all clear. And we have a lot of information on our website in the blog section. We've reprinted several several papers and lots of information from scientists that will, I think, make people a little bit less frightened about bats and COVID-19. So the other thing is that, oops, I'm sorry. Diseases that humans get, many, many, many of them have come from animals. So it's also true that it's not unusual for a disease to have originated in an animal. Probably more than half of the diseases that humans get did originate in an animal sometime in the past. What we're concerned about right now is that scientists seem to be looking at bats to the exclusion of other animals. And because bats have viruses, like all wildlife, all mammals, they're going to find viruses in bats. And I think it's unclear to most people that this is kind of a weighted in the direction of blaming bats situation. So I think it's important to keep that in mind when you hear people talk about bats and disease, and especially bats and COVID. I really encourage you to go and read some of these papers in our blog. So bats are not well protected in most places in the world, and certainly in most places in the United States. Protection varies from state to state. There's very little real protection. In Texas, they're only protected really if they're roosting in or on a building that is not occupied in any way by humans. Humans not living in them and not working in them. So that's not very much protection. And I think that the way to protect bats that everyone can participate in is to simply talk to people you know about the benefits of bats, about the relative harmlessness of bats, that they're fascinating, they're vital to us and to the balance of nature all around the world. So that's the message. That's the message about bats, that if you take nothing away from this talk except that, I would just be so happy if you can just keep in mind that they're beneficial, they're important, they're vital. And they are not dangerous as long as you don't try to handle them. So at this point, I'm going to stop share and see if we can get Lee out in the flight cage to jump in here and show you some live bats. Let's see, there's Lee McKenzie. All right, take it away, Lee.
Okay, well, thanks for hanging in there, everybody. We wanted to show you a little bit of the refuge here just before it gets dark. I've been out here feeding while Dianne was talking, and just happened to have a couple bats in my hand here that I'd love to show you. That these are the ones that we're worried about with the palm trees. This bat on the right is a northern yellow. This is our girl Vinny. Been with us for quite some time now. And this one on the left is a new bat arrival that came in during the freeze. she is a southern yellow bat, and she came in from 45th and Duval. So right here in the heart of Austin, of north central Austin, where the refuge is. She was blown out just before the snow hit and landed in a parking lot, and somebody scooped her up right before the snow came. But I just want you to look at the difference in the head profiles. The northern yellow Vinny on the right there has a big bear of a head, and the southern yellow bat on the left here, who doesn't have a name, has a little ski jump nose. So, I have itchy mosquito bite on my neck. Okay, so anyway, they're much they're very big difference in size too. Vinny is small for a northern yellow, and her body is still quite a bit bigger than the southern. But normally I would say that yellow northerns could be up to 3 times bigger than the southern yellow bats. So that's how we tell them apart, basically size. But when they're orphans and small babies, oftentimes it can be a little difficult. And if that's the case, then we go by the fact that the southerns oftentimes are kind of woolly looking. They're shaggier and they're more olive colored in general when they're babies. These northern yellows can be blonde and just ash blonde and beautiful. And these little southerns are kind of a olive, yellow. But both beautiful bat species. We're real worried about both of them now that people are starting to trim in earnest. Let's see if we can get this one to fly. She's a beauty. Flies pretty well, but we can't let her go because the tree that she came from looks like it might have died. So we're real worried that where we're going to put these bats. If I know y'all are located pretty much further north, but if you know anybody with palm trees in the Austin area down south, we'd love to know if anybody has a palm tree where they're willing to host yellow bats. We would be very interested. We've got bats that need to get released, and we don't have a good spot for them yet. So keep us in mind, please. So right here we have a real beauty hanging from the netting here. She's been crawling down to get her dinner. I'm gonna bring her out in the light a little more. This is our Ahori bat. She was found emaciated on an oak tree in Pflugerville in November, and she would not have made it through this brutal winter. We're really happy to have been able to host her, but she is a gorgeous little bat, and she's voracious. They're voracious hunters, and she's, in the wild, they're voracious hunters, and they're also pretty voracious in the flight cage. So let's see if I can find a mealworm that she'd be interested in. But anyway, she's a real beauty, and I love when they're full. Oftentimes they'll just howl like wolves when they've had their fill and they're feeling good and they want to say how amazing the world is. Oftentimes they'll just let out a big old howl. I wish I could hear it, but obviously ultrasonic. But what a beauty this little one is. Look at that black ear liner. Just a real strikingly beautiful black bat. We call her Cleo. She's great. So I'm gonna put her back here. She's had more than enough food. She has her little spot up there that she likes real well. So I'm gonna put her on it. Before it gets too dark, I'm gonna see if I can find the pale males. We have 3 interesting looking bats up here, and they're real skittish, and I may not be able to find them. So I don't have my headlamp on. Unfortunately, I'm sorry, it's a little dark right here. I think I found the 2 of them, at least 2 out of the 3, but I'm not seeing Moby right offhand. That's too bad. I was hoping to show you our little white boy, but you've already seen him on Diane's video, the white freetail boy. He's I call him Moby just because I think he's kind of sought after. It seems like anytime you see bats flying around the flight cage, he really catches your eye. He's like the first thing you see. And I think he would really be highly sought if he's in the wild. I'm afraid that hawks would also single him out of a crowd of bats. Here's our two pallid boys, Bo and BD. I can tell it's Bo on the left, just by the way he acts. BD on the right with his head down and showing proper contempt for humans. He likes to remind us that he's not a trained SEAL and he's not going to do anything we want him to do. Good boy BD. Bo's a little more friendly. I think he's a little younger. He's pretty awesome dude. I wish I had the ability to zoom in and get him properly lit for you, but that's a little better. Yeah, that lighting's better. Okay. I'm working off a little tiny 3/4 of an inch screen here, so you have to bear with me. But these little pallets are just awesome. Our pale males, Bo and BD and Moby. We're real fond of all of them. Feel real lucky to have been introduced to any of them. I mean, it's absolutely remarkable that we get to do this in our minds. I wonder if they were going to fly, but it doesn't seem like they really are. Oh, yep, there goes BD just took off, and I know it's probably impossible to see. Maybe you got a glimpse of Bo taking off out of my hand just then. But they're remarkable flyers. They don't fly like any other bat in the fly cage. They fly with their head kind of cocked down a little bit, or is it up? It's not in line with their body. I guess it's up. They look kind of like, they remind me of seahorses when they fly. So they're pretty distinctive in the air. They're really remarkable. They're the only species in their genus, the Antrosus genus, and they're wild. So what else do we have here? We've got some red bats. Not as well. In about a month, we'll have 40 or 50 red bat pups. Right now, we just have this one little bat hanging way up there on the top. You can see, maybe you can see a little dot up there, but she doesn't want you to see her because that's what they do. They're very good at just flying up in a place where the lighting is so intense that you can't see them in the shadow. So that's kind of what they do. They get right on the edge of a dark place. And I guess I should have had my headlamp on. I didn't know it was going to get this dark this quickly, but you'll get a good look at her, and we don't have much time anyway. So here's a good look at this little red bat. Hi, puppy dog. Hello, pretty girl. Hello, kiddo. Good girl. She's a real beauty. We're just crazy about this little bat. She's about as wild as they come, and when they calm down and have a moment with you, it feels like a real honor. It's just such a privilege to get to hang out and see these little beauties. But here's her big furry tail that she'll use as a blanket and a poncho to curl up in every morning, sleep the whole day with her tail pulled down over her head, her head curled up into that tail. But she'll be hunting with that tail tonight. She'll be flying along and do little backflips like this and come down with a moth in her tail. And we've got some amazing footage, courtesy of some researchers that filmed them last year. And we're going to host some more researchers this year. So we hope to have some more spectacular 300 frames per second footage of these bats flying and hunting. So that's the beauty of this cage. Here it's an organic vegetable garden, so these collard greens attract the moth crop pests that like to lay their eggs on these crops so that their larvae have something good to eat and nourishing to grow up with. I don't see any larvae right now for some reason. I don't know if we're in a middle of a cycle or what, but when they hatch out, they fly up around this black light, and that's where all the action is at night. So up here around this black light attracts all the moths in the cage, and the bats go fly around in big circles and do backflips under this black light. So my favorite place to be is right over here in this corner every night. and just watch the action take place. And it's really astonishing. One of the stars of the show is this little tricolored bat right here. We finally realized that she flies pretty darn well because she's patrolling all night. She patrols all night long, and pretty slowly, actually. She flies pretty slowly, but then she'll dart after a moth real quickly, like, and strike at it almost like a snake. She just goes bam, bam, and grabs those little tiny midges and mayflies, and she makes a really good living on little tiny insects. But this is another bat species that's really well adapted to the city. Look at how beautiful those wings are. She's a gorgeous little bat. But these bats are totally happy in the urban landscape. They love to roost under an overhang to get out of the rain and out of storms. And we frequently have calls about them hanging high up on an overhang under a building. And we tell people, as long as they're high up in the air, they're fine. Just let them go, leave them alone, and they'll be gone tomorrow. And they usually always are. Sometimes they're down. If they're hanging low, we'll want people to bring them in for us. But for the most part, if they're not in a place where they could be reached by a cat or little kid, we generally feel like they're probably better off just being left out there. So that's about all I got for now. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning in. I hope some of y'all are still here. We're still able to stay for it, but all of y'all we'd love to meet y'all in person someday. I think Dianne probably has, but I don't think I've met a whole lot of your group, but I look forward to that someday. Hopefully actually in person and up close. So thanks very much, y'all. Really enjoyed it. I'll turn it back over to Dianne.
Thank you, Lee. Okay.
All right, Dan, so we do have a few questions if you got time to answer.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Oh, so somebody was wondering, the really young pups that you have, the 24-hour-old kind of deal, where do those come from? Are they abandoned by their moms or what?
Well, the little Freetail came in. We named him D-Day because we got him on D-Day. Somebody called the house. This was 3 years ago. Called the house about 9:30 at night, and it was a woman from out of town, and she had been at the Congress Avenue Bridge watching, and she was just walking across the bridge to go back to her hotel, and she saw out of the corner of her eye, I don't know how she even saw this, she saw this little tiny baby Freetail, and she actually didn't even see the whole bat. She saw a tail and his 2 back feet hanging off the edge of the bridge. So he climbed, this little 1-day-old bat had climbed all the way from inside one of the crevices below the whole bridge and up along the side. And what happened, unfortunately, what probably happened was that something had happened to his mother overnight. Freetail bats will typically only feed their one pup. So they have one pup once a year, and they will usually not feed anybody else's baby bat. So if something happens to mother, it's really, it's unfortunate. So this woman found the bat. She called. I drove down there. She was standing in the middle of the bridge, God bless her heart, waiting for me. By that time it was 10:30, and I kind of got down on my hands and knees and climbed under the railing and grabbed this little bat. And that's how it started. And you never know if you're going to be able to have success with a pup that young. And often it does not end well, but sometimes it does. And so those are the victories that we really, really celebrate. Little D-Day went back to the Congress Avenue Bridge.
Great, that's a great story. Somebody else was asking, where were the bats living that survived this freeze in February? Were there places that they did better or worse in?
Well, that's a good question. The bats that we took in were all found underneath bridges. So 9th Street Bridge, the oh gosh, I can't even think. We got some in from Navasota, so quite a couple of hours from here. So a biologist picked some up and brought them to us.
Can I
And a
break
couple
in,
of,
Diane?
pardon me?
Can I break in?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
We got a lot of bats from Wells Branch and
Thank
Howard
you.
Lane,
Couldn't remember.
Ditmore Bridge in South Austin,
Yeah.
Loyola Bridge over on the east side over Walnut Creek, and 9th Street Bridge and Congress. So we had our hands full here in just responding to phone calls from people walking around saying, I'm walking under this bridge and there's 100 bats on the ground, on their backs, waving their arms around. So that's where most of the bats came in. As far as the ones that survived, we think that perhaps they may have been in somehow they found a better microclimate. Some of the bats seem to be half frozen, where one wing would work and the other would not, and they took. Sometimes they regained function. We think their nerves were damaged. Sometimes they did not regain function, and some died. And lots of them were DOA by the time we brought them back here. Many had already expired. But we think that some found favorable microclimates. Perhaps they were out of the wind. Unfortunately, all the bridges aligned north and south, and all the crevices aligned north and south, and they were exposed to wind. And so the wind just whistled down those crevices. Maybe some were closer to the protected area on the north side of the bridge, but it didn't really seem that way. We think that maybe they clustered together, and that because when we got them, they were just piled on top of each other in a big dog pile, and they would not leave. That's all. They wouldn't hang or anything. They just clustered on top of each other. And I think the ones that survived may have clustered inside a group of bats and been on the inside. Some where one wing was frozen, maybe were on the edge, and others were completely exposed on the outside and just died or never were able to fly again. So don't really know which ones were more protected. All the bridges suffered great losses, and we didn't. I think the only bats that really survive are the ones in buildings. So
Well,
what
or
we
in
normally
caves.
say,
Or actually,
yeah,
the bats that were in caves did well too. Bracken cave
Yes.
bats survived because that temperature stayed well above freezing. So,
yeah. But also bats also perform a valuable service. They do a free energy auditing service every winter, where they look for buildings that are leaking air, that are warm air, that are poorly insulated. They seek out those buildings, and they often go to those buildings in the winter. And we think a lot of the overwintering Congress bats do that, go to buildings downtown that are not well insulated. And when people say, oh, I've got a bat infestation, I like to say, no, you just got a free energy auditing service courtesy of the Congress Avenue Bridge bats. So they just need to do a better job insulating their attics, but on their ceilings. But I just soon let the bats have a nice warm place to overwinter. But that's about all we have. All I have as far as. But yeah, Diane's right. The majority survived in caves.
Well, that's a nice service. And speaking of housing, somebody asked where they could get a bat house and what would be the best place to install it.
right. Well, we always recommend Austin Bat Works. It's a company that has been in business here in Austin for a number of years. And they make beautiful bat houses. When I worked at BCI for many years, I was certifying bat houses. At the time, we had a list of people in all over the country that were building bat houses, and we wanted to make sure that they were done correctly according to the best practices. And so I inspected their bat houses at one time, and they're beautiful. They're really friendly people, and they make beautiful bat houses, and they will, I believe they come out and install them. That may not be true. I mean, I think they occasionally do that at least. There are some best practices on our website that it's about 10 or 12 points that are important to do to make it the most likely to get bats coming to your bat house. Things like they should be at least 12 feet. The bottom of the bat house needs to be at least 12 feet above the ground. You shouldn't put them on a tree. They should be a certain width. You don't want a little tiny bat house. It should be something like at least 14 inches wide. The crevices inside need to be about 3/4 of an inch apart. There are a lot of things. And if you check out our website, I think it's under, Lee, is it under education? The
Resources.
resources, right? You'll find that there. They're actually the best practices that were developed at BCI quite a few years ago.
Great. It's a great resource for people to go take a look at.
Yeah.
We had another question that maybe Lee can answer. So they noticed that there were several different species of bats in the cave there, flight area. And they're wondering, like, do you have to separate any by a species or anything? Or they all just get along?
Lee, you want to answer that?
Sure. They do a really fine job of separating themselves. So we don't ever concern ourselves about that. The colonial bats, the bats that roost in bat boxes, seem to get along just fine. So I was able to find the pallid bats, but I didn't find Moby till later. He was the leucistic freetail usually roosts right next to the pallids, and they get along fine. We just call them the pale males, and they get along great. There's Moby flying right now. I could probably put my camera back on. Maybe we can see him. Maybe he'll come back around here. I hope he does. But anyway, he gets along fine with them, and that one bat box has evening bats, freetails, the pallids, and I think that's about all that's roosting in there right now, but they get along just fine. Whereas in the palm fronds here, sometimes we'll look up here and we'll have a whole bunch of yellow bats roosting in there, and we'll find a tricolor in the same group of palm fronds, and it's a huge difference in size between those species, but they seem to just pick their own spot in the palms and the fronds. Yellow bats can be kind of territorial. I'll hear them thumping the fronds with their thumb. They'll kind of drum on it a little bit as if to claim their space. And I'm sure the little tricolor goes, whoa, better not go over there. So they separate themselves really well. As far as the ceiling of the flight cage goes, all the red bats they're just happy-go-lucky. They're happy little bats. They don't worry about a whole lot of anything. So they get along fine with everybody. I never see any kind of trouble up there. There could always be an exception, but it's not the case where we need to build a separate flight cage for every species. There's that little tricolor. I don't know if you can see him up there, that little tiny dot up on the ceiling. I'm just looking at a postage stamp size screen, so I don't know what y'all are seeing. But anyway, let's see. I thought I saw Moby flying around, but no, he must have gone back to the bat box to hang out with the pallid boys. So, oh well. Anyway, no, we feel like they get along just fine.
Great. Well, thanks. That's interesting. We got another thumbs up for the Austin Bat Works. They'd worked with the owner, and they made bat houses that their grandson used for an Eagle Scout project.
Oh, that's great.
That's
wonderful.
Really great.
Yeah, we love them. They're just, they're good people, and they do good work.
All right.
That was a cave myotis flying around just then. I don't know if you could see him, but we have a cave myotis doing little, if you're able to pick him up. He's real shy about the light. That's one species that does not like light. And I'm shining my headlamp on him a little bit just to light him up, and he's not happy about it. But but he's like,
we can see him fly back and forth there. Great.
Yeah.
So we got couple of thank you guys out to you. A wonderful presentation. They said, love seeing the live critters, Lee. So thanks for taking us out to your flight area.
Sure thing.
And they say, please keep up the good work. You guys are making a real difference. So.
Thanks for having
very
us. Thank you
much.
so much.
Yeah, we appreciate it. Thanks for listening.
All right, and I guess we'll go back to Nancy. Thanks, Diane.
Thanks.
Thank you, Diane and Lee. That was a fascinating information that you gave us about bats. I never get tired of listening to you talk about bats. I've heard you in the training class a few times. It's always fascinating every time you help us along with the information.
Thank you.
So if we have no other questions, I'm going to say that our meeting is ended and we will see you next month, most likely on Zoom. Have a great evening. Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good night.